Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone and welcome to episode 191 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on how to manage workplace romances. And it's Saturday the 11th of February 2023 as I record this. So today's episode is just absolutely brilliant because, we've looked at quite a few quite heavy episodes recently. For example, we've looked at eating disorders, which are quite deadly. We've looked at serial killers, again, not exactly a light-hearted topic. So I thought because this is like Valentine's Day, the day after this actually comes out, I thought that it would be a really fun topic to actually look at. I know that I had a lot of fun researching it and actually writing it up, so hopefully you will too. But before we move on to the psychology news section, I actually just wanted to mention that I was having a great conversation with a listener of the podcast on Friday, and I hadn't actually realised how my editing of the past 6 months, because I talk quite fast, I've been wanting to slow down the podcast, and thankfully it's led to lots of new listeners. Thank you all of you. But I didn't realise quite how low it made my voice sound, and so when I sped the edited version back up to what my brain can see as normal, because any audio that isn't 2 times speed, my brain thinks it's too slow, so I sped it up, and I was quite shocked about how low my editing makes my voice seem. So it was quite a shock. But hopefully I've got the editing down properly this time. Okay, so sorry about that. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one I think is just brilliant. People use similar facial expressions when talking to babies and dogs. If you find yourself pulling the kinds of faces at your dog that you'll also pull to a baby, you are not alone. In fact, new research has revealed that there are 6 distinct facial expressions that adults rarely or never use with another adult, but do use with either a baby or a dog. With pre-verbal infants, these kind of expressions can help to maintain attention and de-escalate in engagement positive feelings towards the child. It seems likely that adults use them to try to signal the same thing to their non-verbal dog. So this, I think, is just brilliant because my mind is a bit harsh at times, and basically this is telling me that we treat babies the same as dogs. Of course, that isn't the case. That's why my rather dark, humorous mind actually goes first of all. But I think this is a very interesting finding because it does show that as humans, we really do want to communicate with things that are important to us. Because I know that from listening to dog people, dogs really are part of the family. Basically, just as a baby is. So we always want to communicate with them. Dogs and babies are both important to us. Hopefully, and of course, I'm not a dog person, I'm not a dad or anything. Hopefully, a baby would be more important to you than a dog. But I know from listening to others and listening to friends and other family members that do have a dog, there's basically very little difference. So I think this is a funny finding, a very good one. and it's something to smile about on your Monday morning. People who say they hold strong moral values often give themselves a free pass. You might expect people who claim to have a strong moral character not only to behave more ethically, but also to hold themselves to the same standards as everyone else. However, according to a recent paper, such people can in fact be more prone to moral hypocrisy, judging others harshly whilst giving themselves a free pass. This was especially true for those who cared more about managing their reputation. The work suggests that at least some people claim the moral high ground because they think it will boost their social standing, rather than because they truly subscribe to those ideals. And yeah, I absolutely believe we all know at least one person that does this. I'm almost quite glad to say that I don't fall into this category because even though I have very, very strong morals about specific areas, in other bits I'm a bit like lax in, and but in the areas I do hold quite strong morals, I'm very firm. So I think this is an interesting one, but hypocrisy. No one likes a hypocrite, but I think that's quite a silly saying because everyone is a hypocrite well, to some extent, though. And this has to do with a ton of different social factors, but it's interesting. What's your experience of moral hypocrisy? Let me know. So, the final one is the colour of plates can influence how food tastes to picky eaters. Okay. Picky eaters can be extremely sensitive to the sensory characteristics of food. Small differences in the smell, taste, texture, or look of a certain food can lead them to reject it. But what about the plates that meals are served on? A new research study finds that the colour of serving dishes does affect how picky eaters perceive the taste of crisps. At least the results are only preliminary, but if further work finds that the plate colour of food can similarly affect the taste and the desirability of a broader range of food, then perhaps this could lead to better strategies to help picky eaters expand their repertoire. So I definitely had to admit when I was first reading this, I was thinking this might be an interesting study, but what real world application could this possibly have? But the problem with picky eaters is that they are very picky and they really do narrow what they actually like to eat. So there's a strategy, and to be honest, a very affordable and easy strategy that parents and carers could actually use to help picky eaters become, well, less picky, then that is actually brilliant. Personally, and only because I'm really quite jaded after my academic placement year, preliminary results I'm not a fan of. I always prefer real studies just because of how traumatized I am because of the gamification of autism literature. But I think this has great potential, and I hope that the researchers do find something important because I think this could have really good implications for the future, not only for clinically normal picky eaters, but I wondered could this have any possible impact on people with eating disorders and especially children who, to be honest, are quite naturally picky. Yeah, my niece and nephews, when they come round, it really is a case of just eat it. Yeah, but you've got to love a family. So I hope you enjoy the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So moving on to the personal update. So there's actually quite a lot of quite useful things that I actually want to talk about this a week because the problem with the content part of today's episode is that they're on a specific psychology topic. So the personal updates are basically the only way that I can give tips and tricks to different people and most importantly students. So I will not lie, this week has sort of been really tense because, as I've mentioned before on the podcast, we've had tons of like dropouts. And I mean, like Monday, participants were dropping out like flies for various reasons. And as I mentioned on like last week's episode, well, this is perfectly natural. And there's like researchers, you've actually got to just enjoy this, and you've just got to accept it as a part of the researching job. But after Monday, we could not afford to lose any more participants, and because we also lose participants throughout the week occasionally, I was rather tense. But Friday went like perfectly fine, and Friday was the most tense day though, because we're fine for behavioural participants, but what we really needed were EEG participants. That, and the worst thing that could have happened is because I was doing them, is that I forgot to press record. Thankfully, that didn't happen. So at the end of Friday, I was really relieved, and then I realised how tense I've actually been all week there, because I didn't want anything to go wrong. Yeah, but data collection is almost over, and the useful thing that I actually wanted to mention for any of the ecology students on the podcast is that now that I've basically done all of the data collection, I want to say that if there are any young students here who are nervous, worried, or concerned about data collection, don't be, because in my experience, it's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun, though, especially if you're working with someone else, though. Like the girl that I'm working with, she's been brilliant. We've laughed so much. What much on Friday we were getting really reflective, because it was the last EEG though that we would be doing together. It was a lot of fun. We've laughed a lot. We've not cried a lot, but you get the expression though, because things have gone wrong. So we've laughed about that even more, and it's just been great. Talking to participants has been wonderful, and to be honest, if you have laughter lines, they will get even bigger. If you don't have laughter lines, you will have some by the end of your data collection. So I would say definitely work with other people if you can. But also try and work with participants directly in your final year project. It's a lot of fun. It will be so much more rewarding, and I've just had a blast. So, but there are only two more interesting things that I actually want to mention though. For example, is that if you're on my psychology email list, and if you follow me on my Twitter and Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, then you know that if you I basically did a call out to see if any of you know any clinical psychology or psychology myths that you've encountered, and if you do know any, then please contact me, because I really do want to find out some of these myths for a new book idea that I've got. So what I mean by myths though, for example, my absolute favourite one that I've encountered is that clinical psychology doesn't look at biological, psychological or social factors. It only looks at mental health. That I think is a brilliant myth, because what is this mental health angle? And it's just that is a big myth. I was quite shocked when I heard that people didn't think clinical psychology looked at psychological factors. Of course, we have psychotherapy, so I thought it was really funny though. It's just those sort of myths. If you know any, then please get in contact with me. And finally, I've started applying for master's courses. So that I sort of did as a spare of the moment thing. I am starting to apply for masters courses. Yes, a clinical psychology masters. Yes, this I really am looking forward to. Speaking of which, if you have any clinical psychology masters experience for some courses, applications, what it's like, and other stuff like that, then please contact me. And now I'm thinking about it. If I get enough responses, I might ask people permission, if I can quote them. and sort of do a larger podcast episode based on people's experiences, just so everyone benefits though. Yeah, but a benefit though. Some interesting times ahead. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always leave a comment on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley, or leave a comment on the Facebook post at Connor Whiteley, psychology author. And today's episode has been sponsored by Psychology of Relationships, the social psychology of friendships, romantic relationships, and more, 4th edition. So this is just such a perfect sponsor for today's episode, because I really love this book, because even though it's not really clinical psychology based, forensic based, or anything that I normally gravitate towards, I still love this book though, because it does look at the biological, psychological, and the social factors behind why relationships form, be them romantic or your normal everyday friendships. It also looks at communication, which, as it's Valentine's Day, a day there tomorrow. Maybe the partner, the members of the audience, might want to improve their communication skills. And aside from looking at a bunch of pro-social behaviour stuff towards the end of it, it does look at why do relationships change or end. That looks like relationship breakdown. So this is just such a great sponsor for today's episode. And if you want to understand the social psychology behind all of our relationships, then this is an absolute brilliant book to look at. So that is Psychology of Relationships, the social psychology of friendships, romantic relationships, and more, 4th edition. Available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore, or local library. And you can get the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Connor Whiteley. And supporting authors directly just helps them all, because they get more of the money in instead of the larger companies taking a larger slice. So that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about how to manage workplace romances. So this is just a brilliant episode that I am really looking forward to sharing with all of you. So let's dive into it. They aren't rare. Well, there's a lot of this information that does sort of come from the perspective of a manager or boss. I will comment on how us as non-managers would use this information to manage a workplace relationship. And this is important for all of us, because we never know when we're going to meet the man or woman of our dreams, and it could very much be at work. In addition, it's important to note that workplace romances are very common, and they're highly accepted. Since a 2022 Society for Human Resource Management survey found that out of 105 American adults, a third of them were in a workplace romance. This appears to have increased slightly from 27% pre-pandemic. But thankfully, few people appear to care about these workplace romances are on the rise, since the survey also found that 75% of US workers are comfortable with workplace romances. Personally, I completely agree, because I don't see why they would be a problem, because as long as the people in the relationship are getting on with the work, and they aren't disrupting the office or workplace environment, then I seriously cannot see the problem. As well as, on a minor side note, I want to mention a connection. Admittedly, this is a rather tenuous connection, and this is also a sign that this is acceptable, is that the workplace romance genre has actually morphed into its own subgenre of a romance. Now, I want to mention this as something important, because it means that lots of people enjoy reading about this. So not only are they comfortable with the idea with romances, but they also want to experience what a workplace romance is like. Granted, this is in a fictionalized way, but as a reader and a professional writer, I understand how subgenres are formed, and it is a fairly major thing that does reflect wider society to some extent. How could managers and leaders prepare for workplace relationships? Whilst workplace romances are great and they're on the rise, I think we can all admit that for leadership and management teams, they can create a bit of a headache. I don't think anyone's going to deny that. So here are 3 things that can help leadership teams prepare for these romances, as well as I'll explain how these help non-leaders too. Be clear and establish even clearer guidelines. So I know how annoying it is as an employee when your bosses do not give you clear guidance on any situation. Of course, I can't name the company. It's annoying. So, for starters, don't do that, bosses. But also, bosses need to prepare to lay down the law of their company, regardless of how this could affect their approval ratings. As well as this links back to what I mentioned earlier in the episode. Romances can shake up working in environments, create problems, and cause interpersonal conflict. As a result, it is important to set boundaries with workers so that the workplace can continue to be a neutral space or whatever your company believes in. For example, if your company thinks public displays of affection, PDA, aren't appreciated in the workplace, then it is better to tell your workers this before they get called to doing God knows what in the breakout room. And you might want to remind them that it's a breakout room, not a makeout room. Overall, for bosses and managers, it's important to be clear on these guidelines so everyone is up to date and clear on what the company wants. For workers, I would just say respect the guidelines and the rules, and if you do fall in love in the workplace, don't make out constantly or in front of other people because that can be a little off-putting. But again, your workplace might be different. So just read the room. Basically, just use common sense. Talk to human resources. Now, I have to explain that it's only really normal to have a human resource department if you're working for a big company. But every business does have a HR department of some sort, even if the boss of the small business is the HR department, and a bunch of other things. As a result of these romances on the rise, everyone in leadership and management roles does need to be advised and prepared about the company's position on such matters before these relationships occur in the first place. This way, it helps to prevent or at least give the leadership team the knowledge about what to do if challenges arise because of these workplace romances. Don't be a hypocrite. I really love this rule because it is so right. There is nothing more annoying in life than a company having a rule banning relationships in the workplace only for the boss and the boss's friend to do the complete opposite. That's annoying. I think workers find it annoying, and it really does not help the boss have the respect of their workers. In other words, whatever your position and company rules are, make sure you stick with them, and whatever you do as a boss, that is the behaviour you promote to your team. For example, if you're paying them special attention or extra close interest to someone, and even if this isn't for romantic interest, you will create problems in your team. Because there's a real risk you will be seen to have one rule for everyone else and yet another rule for yourself, as you're the boss. Workplace romances versus workplace harassment. However, I absolutely couldn't do a podcast episode on this topic without talking about sexual harassment. This is wrong, disgusting, and women and the handful of men that face it should never ever have to experience that. However, we have to talk about when the workplace and intimacy are mixed, there is a very real chance of an abuse of power, as well as, like all the high-profile court cases reveal, you cannot rely on everyone reading the situation the same. For example, if we look at Weinstein, who still protests his innocence despite serving an extended prison sentence, and his accusers and the millions of supporters around the world maintain that he didn't only harass women, he raped dozens of them in so-called work meetings. Additionally, there were mixed interpretations of what actually happened at a company called KPCB, since it was revealed during a closely watched court case in 2015 that a junior partner did start a sexual relationship with Parlo shortly after she had joined the company, but when the relationship didn't work out, she was excluded from networking events as well as in appointment meetings, and yet none of this was enough to persuade a jury that she had experienced discrimination in the workplace, so she lost the case. That is amazing to me, to be honest, but the legal system is just weird at times. Another way to put this into perspective is that despite how many abuse and harassment headlines we see, there are tons more cases we never hear about. These cases are wide-ranging, from harmless flirting at after-work meetings to more persistent and very concerning forms of harassment and awful abuse that no one, absolutely no one, should ever suffer. However, the real problem is a lot harder to solve, because when a romance or harassment case happens in the workplace, you cannot escape it easily, and rejecting someone in the workplace is more risky and challenging, especially if this person is someone you report to, or is a team member that might turn the other team members against you in some sort of revenge plot. Overall, when it comes to workplace romances and preventing harassment, it is the duty of all managers and leaders to understand how power dynamics work and how they impact the working relationships in the working environment. Due to the workplace, it can be a great place to meet people and for relationships to develop, but they can be risky if status, power, and high stakes are involved. Harassment is something we all need to be mindful of, so that we can keep everyone safe, be it a man or woman, a friend or enemy, of a worker we know greatly or barely at all. Conclusion. So, to wrap up this business psychology podcast episode, I want to mention that workplace romances, I think, have great potential to be a lot of fun, great, and really nice. And I'll admit that I've worked with some people who I really would have wished that that this sort of thing could be developed with. Because, as I've mentioned earlier in the podcast episode, you will never know where you're going to meet the right man or woman for you. Because, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast episode, you will never know where the right man or woman for you will come from. So, the workplace be where you meet your ideal partner. Since when sparks fly in the workplace, the results can very much be powerful and great, or they can create a ton of problems for someone's team and to the company they work for. And that's all before we remember the risk for abuse and harassment. Workplace romances can be great, but we just have to be as careful in the workplace as we do in other areas of the dating world. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's podcast episode and that you got something out of it. I really do quite like these romance topics because they are really fun, they're really light-hearted. I think that we can all admit that we've worked with people who we thought that they're great, and I wonder what if. Well, I know that I have. So if you know someone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And please check out Psychology of Relationships, the social psychology of friendships, romantic relationships, and more, 4th edition. Available in all the usual places, and you can buy the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Connor Whiteley. But if you didn't want to buy a book, but you still wanted to give the podcast a bit of one-time support, then you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at connorwhiteley.net. So have a great day and I'll see you next time.